How's it going, folks? This is Aaron the Pedantic, joined by my friend Gimdall, the little dragon man. Today, I wanted to talk about my Old School Essentials public game because it has been so much fun. So much fun. I am doing a blog post where I'm chronicling everything that happens in I would say, a more narrative perspective, I guess perhaps. Basically, there is an NPC in the keep, and this is kind of like a keep on the Borderlands style game. And this NPC is someone that the players can choose to have their characters report to let him know what transpired on their journey. Now, this can mean that they can actually lie, which is I find to be an interesting thing, because then I can get contradicting stories from multiple accounts, different characters, and then comment on where they seem to differ. So this is a historian character. So that's something I'm doing. This isn't really going to be that I would say direct. But so really I have two groups going on right now. And when I say group, it's kind of a loose term. There are typically the same players in each group, plus or minus one or two. And sometimes somebody can't make it. Sometimes they'll switch to another one. I have some that are doing both, and some that are just doing one. It just kind of depends on their availability, but it is a public game. So if you're interested in, joining, you can just join my Discord and go to the scheduling channel and then ask to join, basically, one of the site excursions. And the times are posted and all that kind of stuff. But so we have two sites. One of them is the site of this crypt, this ancient crypt belonging to... without revealing too much, what they have uncovered is that it belongs to a serpent kingdom of some kind, and that they have so far dealt with some incredible things in there. So they have dealt with these wisps that would possess people and try and make them kill each other. They've dealt with a tremendous amount of snakes, and if you're familiar with old school D&D, snakes are terrible. They're terrible. I mean, they have a very high percentage chance of surprising you. And if they bite you, then, you have a very low percentage chance of not dying from their venom. So incredibly dangerous. There have been several traps. There's traps in everything I build, basically. And I would say that their ability to prevent being triggering a trap has been about 50-50 so far, which is not terrible. It's not terrible, but it's been interesting, to say the least. So what last happened, I think I told y'all about most of what happened, but they had decided to go. I think I last mentioned about the whole spider genocide thing. So they torched up a whole bunch of spiders. They came back in. And when they came back in, they were notified that basically while, in between sessions, that there was this day of no sleep, basically, in the keep, where all of the dogs in the kennels were just going nuts, going absolutely nuts, howling and crying off in the direction of this tomb, which is not far from the keep, and it's been causing a lot of supernatural disturbances to the people that live in the keep. And so they knew something was going to be different, and whenever they arrived this time, there were wolf tracks, and there was also an obelisk. It was a small obelisk, about 4 feet tall, black, and, with you could just see the carvings of some kind of runes or something. They asked if anybody could read them. The answer is no. It's ancient, way too beyond that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I'm really playing into, is that they are beyond the edge of their kingdom's domain, and they are actually kind of going into the wilds, the frontier, where you have horrible monsters and ancient empires that have fallen, and civilizations that you probably don't know about yet. So it has kind of a discovering, dare I say colonialism, uh, but yeah, just going off into the unknown, and so there are a lot of things that they just don't know about yet, and there's going to be historical findings and things like that, but they weren't able to tell what this obelisk was about, and so there was like a brief time where someone was like, maybe I'm going to touch it, and then of course the player was like, no, don't you fucking touch that thing, leave it alone. So they go into the place, and suddenly they realize that there are wolves all over this goddamn place. So there were quite a few fights. We actually lost a PC very early due to a surprise check. Basically they're going on ahead. They have lights and everything, but you have wolves that are pursuing them quietly, and they failed their surprise check, and the wolves got to go first. And the wolves were able to kill a PC and a few dogs. And, it kind of speaks to just how deadly this game is, because a lot of times you have a lot of mechanisms that'll save you, not so much here. I've already talked about that a little bit, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But it was just kind of a reminder, because so far that group, that Site F group, they have had 0 deaths. They had 0 deaths up until that point. And so then, pretty early in, they end up having a death. They ended up, now this is where saying what your character is doing as you're traveling is incredibly important, because they had already seen my tomfoolery with a lot of traps. So they're like, yeah, we're gonna have a rod, a 10-foot pole that we're going to hold out as we walk. And the reason that they were doing this was because, the 4th floor, which actually I've probably revealed too much, but the floor with the cobwebs and everything, it's very dirty, except in a certain section where it's basically impeccably clean. And some of them picked up on this. They were like, I see what you're doing there. So they're holding out their 10-foot pole, and it gets lodged, halfway into a gelatinous cube that starts devouring the pole just through, this viscous acid, basically. So that is happening. Again, it was a surprise check. They actually were able to pass this time. Otherwise, it was going to be, I gave them a bit of an advantage on it. So, Old School Essentials BX, it doesn't have a advantage mechanic really, but it's, it uses percentages. So typically what I do is, let's say they normally have a 5 in 6 chance of being surprised by this enemy. Well, if they're taking the necessary precautions, that may lower it to a 4 in 6 or a 3 in 6. If they are specifically looking in the direction where this happens and they've heard a noise or something, then it's going to be almost impossible for them to be surprised. To me, that's just the way it should be played. You shouldn't just be a bitch to the book, basically. You should be a damn referee, is what I would say. So anyway, so they're able to detect that this thing is here. They roll initiative. They go first. They throw oil flasks all over this thing. So then I have to ask myself, just how solid is this? Because if they throw a flask of oil and it just goes inside of this thing, is it going to light? Is it because I would probably say no. But at the same time, this is a gelatinous cube. It's gelatinous. So that tells me, well, it may have some resistance. So basically what I decided was that, they're going to make their attack roll with their things. Actually, no, I said don't even bother with the attack roll. So that probably was a slip on my part. I probably should have had them roll it anyway. But to me, I was like, this thing takes up literally the entire hallway. So if you're throwing something at it, you're going to hit it. It's just not a question. But I probably should have had I think I did a probability check. I think that's what I did, was that there was a probability that it would break on the surface, and then another probability that it would, just go inside, and then there's no oxygen, so it's not going to light. The fire's just going to be snuffed. Well, unfortunately for me, they rolled well on that particular thing, and it basically, charred this thing out. So they dealt with that pretty well. Now, I fucked up a little bit later. And it's important for a DM to realize when they fuck up and to acknowledge it and to make things right if what you end up saying did happen would have happened. And that is something that did happen after that particular situation. So they worked their way a little further. Now, they specifically had dogs ahead of them. And this was incredibly important. Had the dogs been ahead of them at one point, there was a tripwire that caused a wall to swing with spikes, basically, swing outward. And so at that time, they were burning away cobwebs. So they were able to reveal the tripwire. So they were able to overcome that. But at that point, had they had the dogs ahead, then, the dogs probably would have suffered some ouchies because they would have triggered the trap very likely. But instead they had burned them. But whenever it came to the pit trap, and I love pit traps. Pit traps are one of my favorites because it takes them to different places if they survive, right? So had they, maintained that same procedure of having player characters in front during the pit trap, that would have been different. So what had happened is they have war dogs and they have regular dogs. Now I could have, instituted you have to have a animal trainer hireling with you that controls the dogs and all that kind of stuff. But really the way I look at it, if you're a fighter who is, going off into the wilderness, you probably have some experience working with animals in a search and, basically search and kill kind of situation. Not necessarily always true, but I kind of assume that this is something that would be a lot more practical in, medieval-esque warfare. I could be wrong. But, there are such a thing as war dogs historically, and they're really, really big, probably about 3 times as big as a regular dog. So there was this whole argument about which do we put in front? Do we put the regular dogs? See, the regular dogs, they're expendable, but they're also a lot more fragile. And they have to pay for these damn things. If they can return them unharmed, then they get a safety deposit back. But if the thing is dead, then they don't get their safety deposit. They end up paying for the whole thing. So there was an argument about, what to do with them. And in my head, I thought that they had settled on that the normal dogs would be up front. And again, this is incredibly important. So the normal dogs, they're going on ahead. And then you have some PCs behind them. And then you have some war dogs behind, protecting the real squishies. That's what I thought was happening. So basically what I adjudicated is that since they were going forward and kind of using the dogs as a way to detect traps, basically, or to detect enemies, to have as a cushion to save themselves, because they just had somebody, get bitch slapped into death just because they didn't have quite enough cushion in front of them. So they, I had thought that that's how they had it, and these dogs did not weigh enough collectively to trigger my pitfall. But the next 2 PCs in line absolutely did. In fact, just one of them would. So what had happened at the table, what I had adjudicated, was that there was, they stepped on this thing because they're kind of using the dogs as a safety net. The dogs don't trigger it, so they just keep going, and then the ground crumbles beneath them. Then they fall, and then I'm like, how much HP do y'all have? Because honestly, if they had 7 or less, they're automatically dead because they can't survive that. 1d6 per 10 feet, basically. So yeah, in 2 instant deaths, 2 instant PC deaths. And, the players really didn't, fight it or anything. But one of them did send me a message and reminded me that whenever they had finished the conversation, they did say that the war dogs were going up front, which changes everything. It changes everything because then you have dogs that are, like I said, they weigh about 3 times as much having just 2 of them easily triggers the same trap, which means that they would fall to their deaths, which means that the PCs wouldn't have died. So that is what ended up happening there. But we carried on because I didn't realize that had happened until well after the session. Then I saw the message and I was like, oh, fuck, he's right. That is exactly what they said, was that we are putting the war dogs up front because the regular dogs were going to be used next to the magic user in the back. So we carried on. So this kind of is almost like there's kind of a parallel universe that has been created at this point, which is really kind of funny because it'll play into the next thing. So the next thing that happened is they cross this pit and they are going to see that there is a room with statues. And pretty quickly they're like, there's something up with these statues, aren't there? So they use some abilities to deter. I think they use detect magic, and I was like, yeah, these things are lit up like a motherfucker. But there's also like a pile of gold or whatever, and they're like, as soon as we touch that gold, these things are gonna kill us. And I'm just sitting here like, yeah, pretty much. But they knew better. So instead, they spent some time triggering the statues and then retreating to the other side of the pit so that they could basically facilitate them falling in. We did some dice rolls to determine, how all that transpired. And lo and behold, they fell into the pit on top of these dead bodies, the dead PCs, squishing the motherfuck out of those. And there were some amethysts that were part of the statues as well. And so there was an attempt to try and retrieve them. Now, they did get that treasure, and whenever they were trying to retrieve that other treasure, here's the interesting thing, is that then you had a new PC that was rolled up by one of the people that just had a PC die. And so they lower him on a rope, and again, we have a surprise check situation. He doesn't really have... they were able to see down what was at the bottom of the pit, and that basically there's a shit ton of rubble. There was some crystals now, and they were basically lowering this person down, and they weren't really able to get a good look around before they start grabbing things. Now, so I roll, because they're taking some time to dig through the rubble at the base of this rope. I was like, okay, so I'm going to do a wandering monster check. It's been a little bit. So it procs, so I rolled a 1 on a D6. So then I'm like, okay, well, what's over there? And then then I do a surprise check to see if it's able to sneak up on our little fellow down there collecting gems. And it was a surprise. And rolled to attack, and it was I don't think it was a nat 20 or anything like that, but I mean, it was instant decapitation, basically. Instant decapitation. It was just a ton of damage. And so then they pull up this guy's body, and at that point he had already collected some gems and squirreled them away. So they pull up his body, and he's got some gems on him. So they're able to retrieve that. And after that, I think they left at that point. I think they're like, fuck it. I think we've done enough. So I think they left at that point. So what's funny is that then we had to retroactively say, well, they wouldn't, those 2 PCs wouldn't have fallen in, which means that you wouldn't have rolled up this character yet. So he actually didn't die here. And neither did those other guys. And I made sure that they got their XP. I had to like rework the XP to make sure that, they got the XP that they would have earned, for the thing, since they didn't die. Because originally, since they didn't make it, they didn't get a share. So the others got more at that point. But so then it comes to the Wednesday game. So here's the funny thing about the Wednesday game. The funny thing about the Wednesday game is that this other guy, the same guy who died in that parallel universe where those PCs fell in and everything, that same character is goes on the Wednesday game. So he, I'm actually, I can't remember exactly what it was that killed them, but just as a reminder, the Wednesday game, that's Site A. So this is the Kobold Fort. Now, they had a horrible, horrible time, trying to break into this place. They had already like 3 PC deaths and I think 2 hireling deaths. And, they typically came back almost empty-handed. They might get like a decapitated head or something to bring back for a reward, but it was just horrible every time. And honestly, when you're dealing with kobolds, that's how it should be. Kobolds should be like this horrible menace that you have to deal with, and it's really no exception. So at this point, they had a relatively decent map developed where they had explored a little bit of the first level. I may be actually going a little bit too far. I'm trying to think. Yeah, okay, because at this point they had, they had gone in and they had successfully gotten some treasure and left, but they were basically on the massive retreat mode. So they had grabbed some goodies right next to the basement entrance that they had been using. They managed to use it again, but it was rough. It was really rough. But they managed to get in. That's right. Okay, so they managed to get in through the basement this time because they raised a whole ruckus in the front. Basically, they were setting shit on fire and making all kinds of noise. And then while all that chaos is happening, they kind of run back around in through the basement, and then just instantly break the thing open again and go in through a trap door from the basement into the first floor. So that's what they did, and they managed to get the kobolds on surprise. So because of the fact that they were fucking around with the front at first. So they do that, and they managed to take care of a couple kobolds. And they are creeping around. They meet a drow in a cage, which basically the drow, kind of like shushes them and tells them to come over. And, there is somebody who speaks Elvish. So the drow was able to communicate with... Actually, no. It wasn't that. It was chaotic. One of them spoke chaotic because we are using alignment languages. I do want alignment to matter in this game. So one of them spoke chaotic, so they were able to talk to this drow. And the drow basically said, "Let me out or I'll fucking scream." And so it was just this delicious moment where all the players were like, "God damn it." So the drow basically convinced them to let him out. And he was able to escape. They tried to get a little bit of information out of him, I think, but it was already starting to get hairy because this place is filled with kobolds, and they were in the area where basically the kobolds sleep. It's just that the kobolds were kind of like patrolling all the perimeter areas at the moment. So they start collecting some shit, and just for a moment they start collecting some shit, and then things start going sideways. They're starting to get attacked, and so they just grab a few things. They manage to get some magic scrolls, and they hightailed it out of there. They bust through the front door. Now here's the fun thing: is in their process of going through the front door, one of them stepped into a pit trap. Again, I love pit traps. The way that this place is designed. And I really don't want to give away. Fuck, I kind of hate that about this. Like, I should probably put a disclaimer to my players that says, like, don't watch this because then I can spill secrets. But I can't really be 100% sure that they're going to go by that. So I can't spill any secrets here. But let's just say that the front entrance is not something that they really worry about that much. So there is a pit dug in basically in front of the front door. Inside of the place. So you step in, if you manage to open the gate, you step in, you fall into a pit, and there's spikes. So somebody just walked right into it. You fell in and took the damage, but survived. And I was like, fuck, they managed to survive that one. Somebody else took a hit from an arrow. And then they managed to basically grab their shit, force the door open from their side. They had to pull the bar off and then, push the door open. And or actually, I guess pull it open from this standpoint, and then they had to they just left. It was very hairy, but they managed to pull it off. The next time that they went in, they had, by this point, they had a pretty decent map of like the hallways or at least part of the hallways of the first floor. They had like maybe a few rooms, because basically they were going through this very quick retreat. After they found their scrolls and they discovered that there was the pile of gold in the big main room, they went on the retreat because there were just a ton of kobolds. They were being kind of like pincered in. And it was one of those things where if they stood their ground, they would have died for certain. There's no question about that. The sheer number of creatures would have killed them. But they were on the retreat, and they're basically like, fuck it, kick down the doors. If there's a trap, then there's a trap. Let's just go. They had Rourke, the hireling, in the front, and he was doing his damnedest to make sure he didn't trigger any traps. They managed to get out that time. So whenever they came back in, they had a decent map. They had a decent map that gave them a pretty decent layout. And so here's the thing, though, is that the kobolds had an entire week since that attack happened. And that attack was an attack that happened a week after one before that. So there's a pattern here, and the kobolds are not dumb. So the next time that the group came in, there were a lot of places that were safe that now had pit traps. So basically this whole place is just becoming full of fucking traps, and they were very vigilant in dealing with them. There are a lot of little skirmish engagements that they had with these kobolds where it came down to, can you kill them before they can get away to alert the rest? At one point, they managed to get their way into the big center room, and they kind of realized that they had their map a little fucky. So they were able to fix that at this point. And part of that was because there was a misunderstanding about where they came in from. And that kind of stuff can happen whenever you're having the player's map, which I love when the player's map. It's so fucking cool. Because then you get to be like, oh, yeah, I like what you got here. It's mostly right, and you can't correct them. You can't correct them unless they bring a cartographer. So anyway, so then they managed to get into the main room again, after some really awesome skirmishes. They managed to kill a lot of kobolds, and they kill more of those insects. I forgot to mention something. Fuck. How did I forget to mention this? So before they got into the place again, this time they just said, fuck it, we're going to go in through the front gate. They had it planned, because here's the thing. Once you have been to a place a few times, you know the layout, you start being able to plan based on it. This is part of what is wonderful about old school play, especially old school play when you're going to the same dungeon more than once, where it's not like, yeah, we're going to go in, it's a one and done kind of thing. And this is not a one and done kind of thing. So they basically, they're like, we're going to bring a battering ram. We're going to break down the doors. We're going to, bring some planks that we're going to put across these pit traps, so that way we can bring in our mules and we can get, this fuck ton of gold, basically. And so that was the plan. And it was working really, really well. So they managed to break in, just like predicted, using a battering ram. They were able to get their mules across, but almost immediately, this time, a lot of the kobolds were in the main room. This was kind of where things got really hairy, because of the fact that they were doing this from the outset, just instantly just run up there, battering ram, break it open. It's in the middle of the day. These kobolds are sleeping for the most part. So, there's this large crashing noise, and all these kobolds are grabbing weapons and preparing. And what the players didn't quite get last time was that the front gate is directly in front of the main room. And so that was the thing that they ended up having to fix. So they break in, they put their planks down, they cross the pits. And then next thing they know, they are walking, like they're looking at the main room, and they're using their lights to be able to illuminate the room to see that, oh yeah, that is where that is. Because then they're like, there's the cage. That's where the drow was. Did they move the cage? And then eventually it kind of clicks. They're like, no, that shit was there. I had the rooms fucked up. And so, they step forward, and there's new pit traps. So because again, they've had time to prepare. And so somebody falls into the pit trap. Actually, no. I take that back. They were using their 10-foot pole to tap, which makes noise, of course, right? So they were pushing it in really hard, and so they pushed through to determine that there was a pit trap there. And at that moment, then it was time for battle. So then it was just this massive like skirmish fest of fighting that transpired. It transpired at first right there. Basically, everybody was like, "Fuck, we're gonna move over down the hallway so that we have cover, and we're gonna throw some oil flasks." And like I said before, I make them prepare the oil flasks in advance. They have to have a light source ready to light them, to throw them and all that. They can't just be like, "I throw an oil flask." They have to have it ready. So they throw some oil flasks in order to keep the kobolds from jumping over the pit and attacking them from behind. And then they go around through the hallway. So at this point, they're like, oh, there's a hole right there where they can crawl through. So one of them throws caltrops into the hole. And so a few moments later, they hear kind of like a wincing noise as one of the kobolds was crawling through to try and sneak up on them through that hole. This is the kind of stuff that was transpiring. They worked their way through, finding several traps, killing several like independent groups of kobolds, and like keeping them from being able to assault them from all sides. So there was just a lot of small fights that were transpiring, and they worked their way into the main room, and they are grabbing all of this gold. This is after, basically they work their way in and they kill a ton of kobolds. So they're grabbing all this gold, and eventually they start hearing this booming voice. It sounds very, very deep for a kobold. And so they are kind of like, oh shit, this is the chief or something, isn't it? So they start pushing barrels in the way to try and block their entry. If they try to come in, there are bows at the ready. They have all kinds of preparations going. So that is happening while the gold is being collected. So of course I had to adjudicate how quickly can they get it, versus how quickly are the kobolds going to swarm and do this attack. And more or less, they were able to grab quite a bit. And they were, they had like kind of like an initial swarm come in that they disposed of fairly quickly. And they started to retreat. But then they heard the booming voice commanding them to get back in there. And at that point, they threw some oil flasks down to try and say, fuck no, you're not getting in. At which point I rolled a morale check on these kobolds. And one of them passed, so he jumps through the fire. And at this point, the rest of the group is saying, fuck it, we're gone. So they're already leaving. And then it was this moment where this kobold was able to close the distance between him and we have this one player character that wanted to get that last bit of extra coin. He wanted to get that last bit of extra coin. And I was like, fuck, this dude is dead. There is no way, because this is not a regular kobold. This indeed was actually, well, I'm not going to reveal it, but it was a bigger one. It was a bigger one, a much more important one. And so they, basically one of the other PCs turns around and nails the fuck out of this kobold with a solid hit. And then the one that was collecting the goods basically goes in with a dagger or a short sword. I can't remember which. And also, I think this was like a nat 20. And what I ruled is that, because adding an extra die gets kind of crazy sometimes, we're just going to do max damage on nat 20. So max damage was 8 points or whatever. And so I rolled the HP on this thing, and it killed it. It killed it. So basically after that point, he's just like, I'm grabbing what's left. Grabbing that dude's head. So, quick decapitation, grab the head, and then they just bolted the fuck out of there. And so they made a huge haul. Several people leveled up. That was a much needed success. You know, that was really 2 successes in a row because nobody died that time. Nobody except for Rourke. Rourke bit one because they dropped insects on them. while they were about to bust the gate down, some of the kobolds that were above dropped some fire beetles down, and most of the fire beetles fell and didn't hit them and died on impact, but some of them managed to be dropped onto some PCs and cause some. That's how that one dude died. That's how he died. That's right. He went up there to try and help Rourke, and then one of them gets dropped on him, and he dies from that. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get around to. So that was the last thing that happened at Site A. So we get to pick up with them tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. Now back to Site F. Now, Monday, which was yesterday, was really, really, really cool. There were a lot of really cool things that happened in yesterday's session. So they went in, and it was really kind of funny because they went in and they're like, look, we've cleared out most of this crypt. So this is back to the tomb. We've cleared out most of this crypt. We think there's still some stuff left. So let's just like really comb through it and just search it out. And, you know, it's going to be just shock and awe, you know? So they're planning on going in relatively guns blazing for the most part. And, but before they go in, they decide to touch the obelisk. You know, well, sort of. One of the clerics says, I want to, you know, because they had been buying some holy water. It's really important to give players things that they can spend their money on, especially if it's useful. And so he poured some holy water on it for a while. And to me, that's about the same equivalent as touching, provided that it has enough pressure for enough amount of time, then it was going to trigger this effect. So basically there was a magic mouth attached to the obelisk. And so then it basically told them, oh, you've been fucking with my tomb, you know, that kind of thing. And so this guy was saying, I've restocked some things, and if you manage to get through this, there may be some work for you, kind of thing. And so it's kind of a hint of things to come, perhaps. Somebody said that it was just the DM talking, and I was like, well, I mean, no, not really, but you could accuse me of that. But anyway, so they decided to go in, and they break through the first level without much difficulty. You know, I did note that they saw more wolf tracks, so it looks like they're still coming in. Again, everything is like kind of a hint of things to come. So they go through the stuff that they've already treaded through, and they turn the corner where they go down the stairs to go down toward the second floor. And before they get to that stairwell, they're assaulted by 2 wolves, which they fuck up very easily. Now, one of the things that has been happening that is probably weird, and definitely not in the rules necessarily. It's not in the book, like on the wolf stat block or anything like that. But honestly, like I've said many times, if you're just using the stuff that's in the book, then you're not really doing anything as a G. You're not using your maximum potential, I would say. So one of the things that they did was they tried to use turn undead on these wolves. And the thing is that there's a little something going on with these wolves. They're not entirely natural. They're not undead, but they're not entirely natural. So whenever they do this and they succeed, basically it's like their eyes change. You know, they look normal in the eyes at that point, and they become dazed for a moment. And one of the things that they noticed whenever they fought the wolves before is that no matter what the situation was, they would not run. Like no morale loss, like checks or anything like that. Somebody was actually asked, are they going to have a morale check or something? And I'm like, nope, not these wolves. Nope. Anyway, so they managed to daze one of them, but they burned them alive anyway. So they died. There's a lot of oil flasks that get used. Eventually, you know, the oil industry is probably the supply is not going to be able to meet the demand, let's say. But for now it's okay. So anyway, they descend the stairs, and at that point, they had never actually gone through this floor yet. They had basically looked, and they saw that there were some bone fragments and some, feces, that kind of stuff. And they're like, you know what? Fuck it. We're gonna go. We're gonna leave. Is what they did. And they went in through another entrance the next time that brought them to a lower level. So this time they actually decided to go ahead and investigate. So, they saw that there was a wall on their right, and there was a hallway on their left, and that at the end of the hallway they could see a wolf corpse. And one of them decided, hey, let's have the elf check out that wall on the right. And, I don't know what led them to that exactly, because I didn't really give them any kind of hints or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, there's a wall there. But I mean, it's not as if I don't describe a wall normally. I describe every wall because that's what they have to do to map. But they're like, no, let's check out that wall. Let's have the elf do it. I think it's because they had an elf this time. So they're like, let's use the elf. So between the elf and the dwarf, they were able to find that it was indeed it did have a secret mechanism to it. Basically was a revolving wall. So they could turn it in order to open. And I was very sad because I was hoping that they wouldn't find it, because honestly, this level is a complete pain in the ass if you don't use that revolving door. But they found it. They've been very good at finding hidden things in that group. So anyway, but they go in, they investigate the wolf corpse, which they find out that the wolf had suffered a massive strike from a battle axe, and that the rest of it had been devoured, like its innards had been devoured from what looked like large canines. So, I let them draw what conclusions as they wanted. But, they have warriors among them that are able to say, oh, yeah, that looks like an axe strike, just the way that it cuts right in, but it's kind of like a large swath, So that was what they pulled from that. So once they realized that door would open, the revolving wall was the thing, they decided, let's not go, because basically, beyond that wolf corpse, they were able to take a left and go down a longer hallway. So they could tell that was kind of like opening up into a larger, part of the area. So instead, they're like, fuck it, let's push that wall. And, they take a moment to let's try and push it with the 10-foot pole. And I'm like, well, you can't really get the leverage to push it with a 10-foot pole. And so they try and check it for traps and all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, you're fine. I did the rolls. Even if there's no trap, you have to do the roll, because otherwise they're going to be like, oh, there's clearly nothing there. And you want them to be paranoid, don't you? So you do the roll every time they bring that up, every time. So they push some coins over whenever they push the door. I had them do a strength check, but they have a character with a strength of 17. So he has a 5 and 6 chance of doing, pushing open a stuck door, basically. So no problem. He pushes open the thing. Some coins start falling over, and the first thing that they see is a statue in the corner of that room. So basically, at that point they've got it like turned maybe. So it's, let's say here is where it is. They turn it about 45 degrees where they can like peer around it and see into that room with some light. And they're able to see that there is a wolf that is made of stone. So, and I kind of had to clarify that, because one of the players was like, hold on, is it like a statue that looks like a wolf, or does it look like a wolf that's a statue? So I clarified, it is wolf sized. So they basically started kind of saying, oh shit, there must be a Medusa or something in this thing. I don't fucking want to deal with the Medusa. So then there was this whole thing about, okay, do we have mirrors? What kind of stuff do we have? And what they decided to do is, they've got their dogs. They've got a bag of chickens as well. At this point, I'm like, I forgot about the chickens. If I would have remembered that they had chickens, I would have been like, there is no stealth for you guys. I'm sorry. There's going to be a bok, 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 all the time. So stuff is going to find you. But I had forgotten about it, so that's my bad. Anyway, so they're like, yeah, let's pull out some chickens. And so they had the dogs herd some chickens down that hallway. to see if they turn into stone. Let's say they look at something and turn into stone. And instead, like the chicken like starts running off in that direction. And then, you know, they hear the falling of an axe hitting the not the pavement, but the stone. And, you know, the buck ends basically. They're like, oh, fuck. So they, you know, they're thinking, was it that motherfucker that decapitated our friend in that parallel dimension? So there's some rare, you know, like player meta knowledge that never should have happened because it technically didn't happen because I fucked up. So on a metaphysical level, that just never occurred. But you know, I was like, I didn't say anything. But you know, so they're they're like, okay, that's not a Medusa. So, but they were still prepared just in case. They didn't know, maybe it's a Medusa that uses an axe. You never know. And I was just kind of like, well, yeah, they got hands. They can use an axe. So they what they do is they toss a torch down that hallway and then go back and take cover. So what happens is, you know, then they are seeing the silhouette of this very large muscular creature that's kind of like walking toward that direction. So they could see the light being cast on the wall with the shadow there. And then they had their preparations ready. They basically got like a shield wall together because they have several characters with shields. They had, you know, some people kind of hunched around the mirror where they could look in that direction to see what it was without actually looking at it. And they were prepared to try and cast, you know, a sequence of spells, basically. Blind was the first one. Charm was the second one, and then Sleep was the third one. So, you know, we roll initiative. They succeed. They basically say the moment that we see this thing, that's what we're going to do. So, basically, it walks forward. They see that it's not a Medusa, and so then they unleash their spells. Now, the blind, basically, it's not blind spell. It's the light spell. And in BX, it's incredibly potent. All it has to happen is they just have to fail a save. And then they cannot attack. It specifically says a blinded creature cannot attack. And this is for 90 minutes at this point. So I'm like, combat over, basically. But, you know, they went ahead and they wanted to charm them. They're like, I want to get this thing on our side. They're thinking, this is probably 4-hit die +1 or lower, so I can charm this, right? And I'm like, it doesn't work. And so then they're like, okay, well, the sleep. And it's like, the sleep doesn't work. So instead, here's where things get interesting, because we have some clerics here. And one of the cleric you know, like they're like, okay, we'll kill the thing. And the cleric's like, whoa, hold on a minute. Hold on. You know, I'm a lawful cleric. This is a sentient being. Do we just slaughter this thing? It's not able to fight us. Could we capture it, subdue it, or something like that? And so then we had kind of like a discussion about alignment. And so the alignment discussion, I actually wrote a blog post on my thing about alignment. Whenever you have alignment, either it means something or it doesn't. So when it means something to me, that means there's a cosmological effect that alignment has. And old school D&D is perfect for this. You have alignment languages. You have weapons that have alignment. You have all kinds of mechanisms. You got spells, you know, that refer to alignment. So alignment is a big deal, and I don't want to undercut that. So basically what it boiled down to was I had to kind of tell him, well, for the purposes of your deity, a chaotic creature, slaying a chaotic creature is what you must do. You have to win this war against chaos. So basically that's kind of where it fell. And so they ended up slaughtering the thing. But it was an interesting discussion before that. It was an interesting discussion. And so then they have this dead creature. Now, the way I described it to them was that it was a creature that is wearing plate mail that has, like they could tell it had been dug into the skin deeply. So it was like really, really tight on this thing. And that, you know, it had these markings on it, which they didn't have anybody who could read this language, which basically I had already, you know, decided beforehand. This entire dungeon, basically, everything's written in lizard folk, and nobody speaks it, and nobody understands it. So they hadn't been able to understand exactly what it was, but they knew that there was something up with this armor, and there's something up with this axe that he dropped. So they first they check out the axe, and you know, they're kind of like, "Ooh, should we get it? Should we get it? Who should pick it up?" And so the dwarf asks, "Hey, can dwarves use a battle axe, like a two-handed axe?" And then the book says, "No, two-handed weapons dwarves can't use." But you know, to me, I'm like, "Fuck you." Fuck you, book. A dwarf and a two-handed axe, they're made for each other. I'm sorry, they are just made for each other. So I said, yeah, a dwarf, yeah, you can use that. You can use that. And I was just sitting here kind of like salivating. See, here's the thing. When you play this kind of game as a DM, like, you get really happy when you think that a character is about to do something that's going to hurt themselves, because especially whenever they do really well before that happens. And here's the thing. It's a sentient weapon. And the thing about sentient weapons is that they have alignments. And alignments on a weapon means that if they touch it and they are not of the right alignment, it hurts them. They can die from touching a sword that doesn't like them. So this is when it broke down. This is when he's like, "I'm going to touch it. All right, I'm going to pick it up." He picks it up. I say, "What is your alignment?" He says, "Chaotic." I'm like, okay, it feels really good. So he got himself a new magic battle axe. Now, he doesn't know exactly what it does, but it does communicate through empathy. So it's able to kind of like give him an idea of what it can do through feeling. So I just went ahead and sent it to him. He doesn't know the full ramifications of what that thing entails, but he knows kind of what it can do. Then we go to the armor. So the armor, as I said, was dug into the flesh. So then they're like, "Ooh, let's get the armor. Let's get the armor. I want to see what it does." And I get the feeling that a lot of them hadn't really dealt with a DM who's going to use fucked up items. Maybe that's a thing, or maybe they hadn't dealt with cursed armor before. And I can say that now because they've already learned this. But so what happens is, you know, they're kind of like, "Well, you know, should we put it on? Because, you know, it looks like it did some stuff to him." And they're like, "Okay, well, you know, do I sense anything evil about it?" I'm like, "Well, you're not a fucking paladin. You don't sense anything." I actually, like, I think I gave like a probability, you know, like a 1 in 6 maybe. I was like, "There's a 1 in 6 he might," which was generous on my part. But I was like, you know, maybe there's a chance that you could kind of tell that you really shouldn't fuck with this, but I rolled it and it failed. So, you know, basically I was like, "It seems fine to you. It just seems really dirty and gross, you know, like it hadn't been removed in a long time." And so it was funny because one of the players was adamant that somebody put it on. And so one of the clerics was about to actually put it on, give it a try. But he's like, "Just to be sure, I'm going to pour some holy water on it." Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is that there is nothing in the book that says if you pour holy water that comes from a lawful deity onto a piece of armor that is cursed with a chaotic curse, that it is going to do anything. Now, here's the thing. If you were to say that this holy water will remove the curse, then what you're doing is you're undercutting, you know, I think it's like a level 4 spell, remove curse, which is a pretty serious offense, I would say. So what I said was basically it sizzles whenever it makes contact. It made sense to me that these opposing forces would have some kind of almost chemical reaction, you know, just like heat and cold, basically. And so it sizzled. So he's like, "Fuck, I'm not putting that on." Well, one of the players, the magic user, was really adamant. He really wanted somebody to put it on. And he's like, "What about my lackey?" So he has this person from the village that he casts Charm Person on, who's been traveling with him ever since then. His name is Moose. It's kind of a joke because he's just big and dumb. So he calls him Moose. And I was like, "Well, Moose is not going to say no to you. He's going to put it on, because if it was just a hireling, I'd be like, okay, loyalty check, you know. And the rule is also they keep it. If they put it on, they keep it. So that's kind of the mechanism that prevents players from just using somebody as a proxy to see what it does, is that they keep it and they do a check first. So in this case, I'm like, well, this guy's charmed and he's kind of obsessed with you. So you tell him to do it, he's going to do it. But it's kind of funny because the rest of the group is like, wow, this character is fucked up. So he has this charmed individual put on this armor, and immediately, once they finally get the thing on, immediately the edges of the armor start binding into his flesh. He starts growing like this very thick hair all over his body. He starts sprouting horns, and his feet like start breaking through the leather soles of his shoes, and you can see like it starts trying to form cloven hooves, and you know, so like he's like transforming very clearly, and they're like, oh shit. So you know, like somebody tries to like cast what was it blind on him to keep him from attacking them, even though I told them this was something that was taking a minute to actually happen. You know, this is not something that's just like, it doesn't just happen. It's a transformation that takes minutes at least. And so they tried to blind him. It didn't work. Tried to charm. Again, it didn't work because he's basically turning into the same thing that last guy was. He was in the process of it. I told him that it probably wouldn't work. I don't think he had an extra charm anyway, but he was concerned about being able to charm him later. But anyway, so then the question was, can we try and remove this from him? Now, in the book, cursed armor cannot be removed. The only way to remove cursed armor is to have the remove curse spell, taken on him. Now, one of the things I wanted to say is that the book is like the overall rule. You know, it's the overall rule, and there are a million gaps. There are a million gaps where it's up to the DM to define exactly what is going to happen in edge cases. And to me, I viewed this as an edge case. Some people might say that maybe I was being generous, but really the way I looked at it, this is something that is transpiring before their eyes. The curse hasn't taken root yet. Now, if there are some curses on scrolls that if you read it, it's just you turn into a toad. But in this case, this is something that takes a little bit of time, and it's like a corrupting influence. So to me, I had these two clerics here that both said, we want to douse him in holy water to try and, hold this thing off and then see if we can pry this thing off of him. And so I thought about it for a moment, and I was like, I could see that working. I could see that working because you are basically stopping it before it becomes the fully enacted curse. So they start doing it. They make their rolls. They're able to, with their prayer and their holy water. That's another important thing. They're expending resources. Resources are incredibly important. If they would have not had any holy water, I would have said, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You don't have any kind of like major backing here. You wouldn't be using any spells. If you were just like, we're just going to pray, you might have a 1 in 100 chance maybe. But with this, I was like, y'all are working together. You're both, devout clerics of your God, and you're working in unison. You're using holy water, all this stuff combined. It's going to give you a chance. And then after that, it was a matter of having strong characters rip the armor off. And it still caused damage because it was digging into his flesh. It hurt him, but it didn't kill him. And so then he was unconscious at that point because basically they beat the shit out of him so that they could start doing it in the first place. So that is what happened to Moose. They pulled the armor off of him. And then it was the question of what do we do with the armor? So most of them were like, let's take it out of here for now. That wasn't really controversial. So they were about to... I forgot the shadows. So before... When did the shadows come in? At one point there were shadows that started attacking. Oh, that's right. It's while they were collecting the gold. So it's before they encountered the creature. I'm not giving its name. Before they encountered the creature, they and while they're collecting the gold, they were sitting there. Like one of the guys was keeping watch on the other end, keeping tabs on what was happening on the other side of the revolving wall. And surprise check and all that kind of stuff. It was amazing. I rolled a 6, on a D6, and there was a 5 and 6 chance that he would be surprised because these are fucking shadows. But I rolled a 6 for him. And so then I'm like, you see these fucking shadows. And then he's like, first thing I do is I just close the wall. And again, this kind of brings into question. Now, to me, shadows should have no problem working their way through cracks in a wall. That's not really hard for them, I would say. However, is that what they would do? Is the question to me. And so you have to kind of go into what is a shadow? What does it want? Where does it come from? All these kinds of things. So I had those questions in the back of my mind as I was making the next determination. And so it had them, I think, very tense where I was like, okay, the encounter's concluded. So what do y'all do now? So that was when they started collecting the rest of their gold. And then they were worried about the chickens and all that shit. But anyway, so then they were like, well, we could go through the rest of this floor going the same way, down where this creature came from, or we could, see if those shadows are still there and we can get the fuck out if they're not. So, they cracked it open. I did my check to see if they were still there. They were. And, then it was a matter of, they were about to get trounced by these shadows. Shadows are vicious, and there were a lot of them. But clerics are incredible. Now, in Moldve, at least the version I have with OSE, shadows aren't repelled by turn undead. They're not actually undead for some reason. But again, like I said, I had to think about where do they come from? What are they? And all that kind of stuff. And I was like, these are undead in my mind. There's not just a monster that just is a shadow that's incorporeal. That's silly. That's silly to me. These are undead. So I made that determination, and they did their turn undead rolls, and they managed to turn every single one of them. And they could have said, we're going to stick around and try and beat the fuck out of them so that we can get some XP. But they said, nah, let's get the fuck out of here. So they double timed it out, and they got their shit. Now they get back to the town. Some people leveled up. But here's the big question: what to do with the armor? And this is a question I had not expected, but I probably should have. So these are characters that are, we're not playing a high role-playing game. When I say that, we're not really having people go into dialogue for their characters, talking in character or anything like that. It's more, what would my character do? This is what my character do. Just what are my decisions for my character? That's how we play the game for the most part in this game. And so this whole thing came out about what do we do with this armor? Because the magic user says, somebody should use it. We shouldn't just destroy it. Now, the lawful cleric, one of them says, we should destroy it. This thing is actually both of them said, we should destroy it. This thing creates chaotic creatures. It corrupts people. It is bad. We should get rid of it. And so I was kind of watching this unfold, and the arguments were pretty heated. I'm not going to lie. They were pretty heated. And I was just like, fuck, am I going to have to intervene at some point and be like, we can flip a coin, but I can't have y'all tear at each other about it. So I was kind of concerned that I was going to have to really get in there. But instead, what ended up happening is one of the neutral party members, I believe, was like, well, couldn't you see if you can fix it? Or actually it might've been the other cleric. Couldn't you see if you could take it to the church and cleanse it somehow? And, then it was just a question of, well, what would be the point? How's that better than, or how much is it going to cost? What's it going to do for us? Is it just going to make a normal piece of armor? And, there's just all this stuff kind of building in. And I love this because a lot of this stuff is just stuff that doesn't really come up that much in my new school games. So it was quite brilliant. So eventually, what it was, you know, one of the clerics was like, okay, I will put forward 200 gold pieces with the church to see if they can fix this thing. And then interestingly, the magic user says, I'll put 200 gold pieces forward too. And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to do that. Well, who's going to use it? You know, if assuming that you can do this. And, you know, the magic user is like, I don't really care as long as it benefits the party, basically. And the cleric says, well, I don't really care either. I could use it, or it could be somebody else if my character's still alive. Because I basically told them that, you know, they take it to the abbot, but they learned that it's going to take time. They're going to have to, you know, pull some resources in from the capital. So they're going to have to send for people. It's going to take weeks. And, you know, then, so they're like, we'll invest in this. But it was a really, really interesting exchange. And then there's the question of Moose. Now, Moose was charmed until he became a much stronger creature that had a higher hit die. And then it was broken. The charm was broken. So basically it just shrugged off of him. So then he basically regains his consciousness. And there is the question of what happens with him after that. So, kind of where we landed on that was, that Nikar, the magic user, basically, basically waited until, you know, he had the chance to take Moose somewhere, and kind of gagged him and bound him, and waited until he was able to get his stuff back, you know, and charm him again. And so I rolled to see if he successfully charmed him, and he did. So Moose is now a mutated human that looks very fucked up, is barely unrecognizable. Basically unrecognizable to anybody who didn't see the transformation happen, and is dumber and stronger than he was before. His hit die is not exceeding the limit of charm person, but he is very tough. And so that's where we left off. It's been really a lot of fun. I love this game, and like I said, if anybody ever wants to jump in, like, you know, just join the Discord and feel free. And we'll see you in the times ahead. But that's all. I know this is very long, but I kind of wanted to fill people in on what's been going on with the game. So y'all take care. That's a fly. Go away, fly. Y'all have a wonderful day.